back. Let's go live to Germany right now. Thomas Paris, political correspondent with our partners DW. He's standing by to bring us up to date on the situation. As you know, the last time we had a chat with him, we indicated that the parts of Europe are opening up their borders once again. There's also easing of restrictions. This afternoon, we're hearing that there are some protests. Thomas, it's good to have you, and thank you very much for your patience. Give us an update on these protests. What are they for, and have they ended?
These protests are actually ongoing. I mean, they started a few weeks ago, normally at the weekends, and it is important to stress that it is a rather diverse group of people who are protesting against the restrictions. It's a bit paradoxical or ironic that these protests actually come or have grown as Germany eases those restrictions, but what these people are actually protesting against is those restrictions as such. You have a very varied group of people, from people who reject vaccinations to people who defend civil liberties to people who are in favor of conspiracies or myths. It's a very strange, diverse group of people. It's been described as a sort of loud minority, and it's important to stress this, Gifty, because when you look at different polls, it is clear that the majority of Germans, and that's not only one poll, but various polls, have stressed that they support policies by the government at a federal level and at a regional level as well. So we're talking actually of rather small groups of people who have been gathering in different German cities to protest against those restrictions. Nevertheless, they have caught the attention of authorities who are worried that those protests could actually be infiltrated by far-right extremists, for example, or other groups, and that they could actually turn more difficult and even violent. We've seen some instances of violence, for example, against journalists in those protests, so it is again something that does concern authorities. It is something also rather difficult to understand, because, as I said earlier, when you have Germany easing its restrictions, at the same time you have people who go out to the streets on different occasions in small numbers to protest against restrictions. So this just gives you an idea of what a small part of the population here in Germany is up to and what they think of what's happening. Again, it's important to stress that a majority of Germans are actually in favor of what the government has been doing and how the government has been easing those restrictions.
It's very interesting the way you put it. Now, when the restrictions were eased is when these people went on the streets. They're probably saying they don't want any more of the restrictions going forward. Speaking of which, you told us the last time we talked to you this week that the borders are beginning to open up. Has it started already? How did it go?
So the borders have indeed begun to reopen. So the border, for example, between Germany and Luxembourg was opened last weekend, and border restrictions with some of the other countries that Germany has borders with, like France, Austria, Switzerland, those controls have also been reduced. That is going to be a process that will be around until about mid-June, when the idea is that then the borders will be completely opened. As you can imagine, this is a rather difficult process because you have to discuss with the other countries exactly how that will work, not only what people will be able to do when they cross, but what kind of hygiene measures or social distancing measures will have to be put in place, and what type of work between authorities in both countries will be like. It's important, all this, Gifty. I went out today here in Berlin to film a report and ask people in different parts of Berlin what they actually think, not only about the borders, but also about all the other restrictions that have been eased. And you do get a sense that many people are happy about the way things are going, in the sense that they can go again to restaurants or cafes, that they can go again with their kids to playgrounds, that there is a sense that they don't have to be at home all the time. But there is at the same time a sense of concern that was also very clear to understand today, that maybe some of those easing of restrictions, some of those restrictions that were eased came too soon. And one person even said that she thought that even the case of the borders was too soon, too quick. So I think Germans in general are a bit ambivalent. They have a sort of mixed feelings. On the one hand, they're happy because they don't have to be at home all the time, especially now that the weather's so great here. On the other hand, they are concerned because the more they ease restrictions, the more relaxed Germans are, and this could also lead to a sort of increase in the number of infected people, and that is obviously something that has not only citizens but also the authorities concerned.
There is no easy balance here at all. But has there been any outcomes from the recently resumed Bundesliga? I mean, anything fallouts that we should know about?
there's something interesting, not about the Bundesliga, but about this issue of the restrictions. There are those who say that actually getting out of lockdown is more difficult than getting into lockdown. And when you get into lockdown, it is actually easy because the government can actually say from now on museums are closed, or from now on restaurants are closed, or from now on kids will no longer go to school. But once you do the opposite, once you start opening up again, that is a very difficult process, because you have to give people the understanding that yes, they can get back to some sense of normality, but at the same time, they still have to take care and they still have to be responsible. And by the way, that also applies to a large extent to the Bundesliga, because the Bundesliga restarted last weekend. There are more matches planned this weekend, big matches as well, without any fans in the stadium, with those measures that we already discussed, those hygiene and social distancing measures. And that again is one of those issues where Germans are divided. On the one hand, they do believe that it's good that football is back, especially the fans who have been waiting for a long time. On the other hand, people are concerned that this again could be a bad example in a way, and that the focus maybe should have been placed on other areas of German society. And there are those who have also criticized the reopening of the Bundesliga, because they say that essentially it was done because of economic interest and not necessarily because they want the sport to be back. So that gives you also the impression of what the debate is here. And it's also, by the way, a debate that has transcended Germany, as other leagues around the world, as other countries around the world also discuss how, under what conditions and when sport can actually go back, and under what new normal that can happen.
It's a conversation we're having here in Ghana as well, and every time we draw our references from the Bundesliga, we're having that conversation here whether or not the Ghana football, the Ghana league should continue. But Thomas, it's good to have you once again. So now that the restrictions are eased, it means that life is pretty normal. We can say that.
It's basically close to normal. So it's been described as an almost complete return to normality. There are things that are still not permitted. So mass gatherings, for example, are still banned. Germans are still not allowed to travel. That is something that, as we discussed, will only happen gradually. So Germans are still very wary of trying to book summer holidays, because borders are still not entirely open, and there is still a worldwide travel warning from the German Foreign Ministry. People still have to wear face masks here when they go out, when they're in public transport and in shops, for example. They still have to maintain social distancing, so they can't meet with a large group of people. So all these things are still indicators that the situation is not over completely, that Germany still faces a challenge, and that the situation could become rather different if the numbers go up again. That's why Angela Merkel said that it would not be very good if Germans, now that they are basically back to normal, and important to stress the word basically, or almost back to normal, if they simply let that opportunity go, because they're not responsible enough when it comes to keeping social distance and maintaining those responsible attitudes when it comes to their interactions with other people.
Very healthy balance we need to strike. The need to have some semblance of normalcy, and the need to still protect ourselves against this virus. Thomas, thank you so much for today. Thomas Sparrow there is political correspondent with our partners DW. Every week he joins us with details of what's happening in Europe and also in Germany. Well, we're hearing that Germany is easing restrictions slowly. Now they've opened up the border with Luxembourg and some other countries. If you live in those areas, well, good news for you. But we keep monitoring to see how that impacts the spread of the virus.